Hello, I'm Charles Spear, the Dean of Residential Studies here at Sunset International Bible Institute. As part of your orientation to the Sunset family and the Sunset training program, we wanted to give you some extra material. We believe these skills are very important to you while you're at Sunset. We hope that this material will help facilitate your learning to assimilate the most of what we're trying to give you in a short and compact time while you're here. Also, we have put in our library here at Sunset a notebook, and in that notebook are some notes from certain websites on the internet that will help you in these three areas. We've also included a page which indicates some other websites that might be helpful to you. And so if you'd like to take advantage of that material, please ask our librarian. And now to good note-taking. Good note-taking is one of the most important skills that you'll need here as a student. I'm persuaded that you cannot remember a great deal of what's taught you in the classroom some weeks later. There's just too much material coming your way. And so good note-taking is very, very essential to you retaining the ability to know what was said in a classroom, how it was said, what are the insights into a passage or a topic that you would like to look at some weeks later, some years later, some decades later even. I was a student here in 1970. I can look back at my notebooks, and because of the way in which I took notes, I can reconstruct the argument that the teacher was making or the flow of thought that was being given at that time. At the same time, I've seen notebooks of some students that didn't take good notes, and so some weeks later, maybe even the next day, as you looked at those notes, they really weren't full enough to tell you what that instructor had talked about, and so they're of little value in the future for that student. Let's talk about three parts to good note-taking. And you might think of good note-taking as something you do just when you're in the classroom, but that's not true. Good note-taking is a comprehensive approach. And so we want to talk about what I'll call observing, we'll talk about recording, and we'll also talk about reviewing. Now, a good bit of this material comes from a book called Becoming a Master Student. I believe the author's name is David Ellis, if you'd like to find that book in some library. I don't believe we have it in the Sunset Library. Let's talk about observing. Chapter 5 in Mr. Ellis's book. Observation, of course, is very important. As a policeman wanders on the scene of some crime, one of the most important things is to observe what has taken place. Before anything is moved, before anything is touched, the overall picture is observed. A mechanic looking at a car before he just launches into changing something or fixing something, he wants the overall view. Observation is very important. A painter, as he looks at the canvas, as he tries to figure out what is next, the observation of the overall is very important. So that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about setting the stage for good note-taking in the classroom. Try some of these techniques while you're participating in observation. Number one, you must complete outside assignments before you come to class. There may be reading that's to be done beforehand. Take care of that because that allows you to think up questions. That allows you to be in the arena in which the instructor will start from. He comes into the classroom ready to launch into an area, ready to talk about something. If you've not read, if you've not prepared, then you don't know what he's talking about. So you've got to read ahead of time. Complete those outside assignments and put some questions in your mind so that hopefully he'll be answering those questions as you think about the material. Generate good questions. Number two, you need to bring the right materials to class. If you get to class and you're asking the person next to you for pen and pencil, well, that doesn't work. If you don't have any paper, if you don't have the books, if you don't have the right materials there, you may be several minutes behind him, not only in note-taking, but also in the thought process, if you're not ready with the right materials. So make sure you have the right writing materials. Make sure you have the right textbooks. Make sure you have the right assignments or extra materials that the teacher has required for you to be ready to go. We don't have a lot of time to waste here at Sunset. We've brought you here for hopefully just 2 years, maybe some of you 3 years if you extend your time here. But 2 years is a time when we want to give you as much as we can. And so lost minutes add up to lost hours and lost weeks, and we can't afford that. Number 3 in observation, sit up front and in the middle if possible. Now, I realize that not everybody can do that, but you need to be in a place in the classroom, and you need to know yourself about this. You need to be in a place in the classroom that is a place where it is not distracting. You need to be in a place where you're prevented from other distractions. The Sunset Auditorium, if you've been in there, is a big place. There are places in that auditorium that I don't like to sit because it's too far from the pulpit, or it's not close proximity to other people, or people are around you in a certain area that have children, or whatever, and those distractions make it very difficult for you to worship. The same is true in a Sunset classroom. You need to be in a place. You need to put yourself on alertness. You need to put yourself in a place where the teacher can see you and make eye contact with you. That keeps you alert, doesn't it? It prevents you from becoming sleepy. Oh yes, that does happen here. After lunch, sometimes it's difficult to stay awake. I don't care who the teacher is. So you've got to put yourself in a place where you can look and see and be prevented from distraction. Make sure that you put yourself in a place where those that surround you don't distract you either. Sometimes our friends distract us. They like to talk. Maybe you're tuned in and they're trying to talk about something else. We don't do that too well, and you may miss some things. So isolate yourself from people and from things that are going to distract you. Number 4, you need to conduct a short pre-class review. And what I mean by that is you need to arrive early enough in the classroom to glance over the notes that you took from the previous class period. Just quickly. Hopefully you've looked at them at home. If you had to retype them, then they went through your head after the day you took them. The next day or the next day you glanced over them again. As you get to class, quickly look over those notes just to re-put in your brain, what is it that we're talking about? Where is it that we need to go from here? Don't spend the first 10 minutes trying to catch up emotionally and psychologically and intellectually with the teacher. What that means is you're going to have to be in place in your seat early enough to do that before the teacher gets there. So take care of the bathroom needs. Take care of coffee needs. Take care of any visiting needs. Take care of getting things ready so that when that teacher begins, you don't miss a thing. And you don't stop him and say, now let's see, what were you talking about? What is it that... That's not fair to the teacher. He's ready to go. Other classmates are ready to go. You need to be ready to go. So conduct a short pre-class review. Number 5, check the quality of your past notes. Now that might be done at home. As you're taking your notes, then when you go home to recopy those or look over those, depending on what the teacher requires, you may have to retype them. Check the quality of those notes. Do they make sense? Could you reconstruct that class period? Could you reconstruct the flow of thought that the teacher was giving you? Or are there so many holes in it? Is it not in full? Did you miss too many illustrations? Does it make sense to you? Could you give it to somebody else and they read it and make sense of it? So what's the quality of your notes? And based on that, what can you do better to take better notes? Once again, I cannot overemphasize the need for full, copious, complete notes that make sense for your future study. Number 6, handle the wandering mind. Handle the wandering mind. If you're in the middle of a class and you're having trouble concentrating for whatever reasons, maybe you're sleepy, some of you may be on even medications that cause you to be a little drowsy or not tuned in as well as you need to be, or maybe it's just a teacher that you're not all that excited about. Or maybe it's the material. This is difficult for you. What do? Well, first of all, you are responsible as a student at Sunset International Bible Institute, and we expect this of you, to stay tuned in. I realize that a day is a long time to stay tuned in. It's hard work to stay tuned in for 2.5 hours in the morning and 2.5 hours in the afternoon. But if you don't, you're going to miss something that later you're going to want. And so you've got to handle the wandering mind. My suggestion is not to get up and leave the classroom. You leave the classroom for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and come back in and try to get started again, it's very difficult. If you need to get up and stretch, if you need to get up and move to the back of the classroom or to the side where you won't disturb anyone else, and get yourself in gear again. Make yourself wake up. If you catch yourself wondering, if you find that you've missed a moment or so, then you need to catch yourself at that point. You need to stop yourself. You need to learn to discipline yourself to get back at the task at hand as quickly as possible. Don't allow yourself to daydream for 3 or 4 or 5 minutes. Don't allow yourself to just lose it there for a while and then realize, oh, wow, I've got to be tuned in here. Maybe even in my presentation to you, have you let your mind wander? Or do you have this ability to concentrate, to cause yourself to stay put? Actually, good note-taking helps you concentrate. It's when you take your pen up and you're just thinking, or you let your mind wander, or you're thinking about some sub-point, that's when your mind is going to wander. And so, staying with the teacher and taking copious notes will help you prevent distractions and the wandering mind. If you suddenly think of something in class that you need to do after class, or something about the family, maybe you need to have your little pad alongside. Jot that down real quickly. Jot you a quick note, an abbreviated note, and then get back so that you can concentrate on what's happening in class. I'm saying to you, don't give in to the wandering mind. It is important for you to concentrate. I know that we live in a society that has been raised on TV. I know that we men are some of the worst at flipping the channels. Got that remote? You know, our wives talk to us about, well, if you would just leave that on one channel. We like to flip the channels. And the reason we flip the channel is that in the first 5 seconds, if whatever's on that TV program doesn't entertain us, doesn't catch us, we move on to the next thing. We move on to the next thing. Folks, Sunset is not like that. If you have a teacher that you think is like watching QVC, or watching an autobiography on A&E of some opera singer that you're not particularly interested in, I'm sorry. That's tough. You need to tune in because there are truths, there are experiences, there are characteristics of every teacher at Sunset that you need in every class that you need. Don't allow yourself to be bored. Don't allow yourself to wander in mind. Stay with it. Number 7, be with the instructor. Study his body language. Get the whole of what he's saying. Now, I know that that's somewhat difficult if you've got your pen down and you're writing, but give yourself enough chance to look up and stay with him. Get involved in his world. He is not put there to entertain you. And again, that's kind of our society. I plop down in front of the TV, I plop down on Sunday morning, and it's up to the preacher, it's up to the TV to entertain me. This is a companion thing in a classroom. This is the instructor and you working together. And you're going to have to work hard along with him. Don't allow yourself to be lazy. Don't allow yourself to be a spectator. You're not a spectator. You are an involved person. So study his body language. Try to figure out where he's going. Cause yourself to ask those questions. Try to get ahead of him, see where he might be going. Quickly look back at what he's been saying. Reason as much as you can and keep yourself involved with him. Look him in the eye. Hopefully he'll look you in the eye. And the communication between you and him will be very important. So get the process of questioning and thinking and critical thinking going on there. Be with the instructor. Number 8, postpone debate. Postpone debate. This is very important here. Sometimes students come and they want to hash out every question. They want to debate every issue. We have not set this school up to hash out, to answer every question, to debate every issue. This is very important. You have other students that are not interested in debating certain questions or issues. They want to know, well, what is it that instructor is going to say next? What material is going to be given from the text that I need next time? And if you debate him, you're going to have some classmates that are going to be upset with you, and rightly so. Now, hopefully a teacher is going to control that. But if a teacher doesn't control that, that's up to you to control. So don't debate here. Note your disagreement. Note your question on a piece of paper, but move on. Don't stop taking notes. Don't lose 5 or 10 minutes while maybe you're not debating the teacher, but in your mind you're rolling that around and you're debating that. Don't allow that to happen. You lost 5 or 10 minutes of material that you should have while you're thinking about this question. Discipline yourself to write that down and move on. Postpone debate. Don't allow internal or external debate to drown out the material that should be given you and will not be given you if you waste time doing that. I'm not saying that those questions or debates are not important. I'm saying that within the limited time that we have, a teacher has material that he wants to give you. And that has to be given in the time allotted. Again, some people come here with the idea, I'm going to have all my questions answered. I'm going to have all the debates settled. It's not true. We'll be doing that for the rest of our lives. I've been out of here for 30 years. Still got a lot of questions. Still a lot of issues unsettled in my mind. Still studying. And so if we can teach you how to study, how to approach a problem, then you can begin to work out some of those things on your own. So make sure your expectations are in the proper place when you come here to take notes. Number 9, let go of judgments about teaching style. We have 20, 25 teachers here. We're all different. We all have different styles. And quite frankly, some of those are liked by some students and some aren't liked by some students. I'm talking about style. We have men that are godly here, that love the Lord and love the book and know the book. They've been overseas. They've been around the world. They have some years of experience and they know what they're talking about. But their style may not be to your liking for whatever reason. You may like this style or you may like that style and not like that one. That does not give you the, the privilege of tuning out. You do not have that option here. You are responsible for taking good notes from every single teacher. So if you don't like a style, don't use that as a self-excuse for being lazy on note-taking. In fact, that might be a reason that you should dive in even more to note-taking. If I have trouble staying with this teacher, then that's when I need to take copious notes. As a young man in college, in a congregation where I grew up, the particular preacher that we had I thought was rather boring. He was kind of monotone. I didn't always like what he had to say. And oftentimes, I shouldn't have done this, but oftentimes I sat in the back of the auditorium with my friends who were college students. To keep myself from going to sleep or not hearing what he had to say, I took notes. Still have those notes in my files. And you know what? Even though he was not the most exciting teacher that I've ever heard, I gained a lot from him because I took notes. That's the only way I could stay with him. And so you adapt quickly. You adapt to a teacher. You find out what's his style, how does he do it, and adapt quickly. Ask people in the Level 2 class if you need to. What's the best way to take notes on him? But let go of judgments about teaching style and get with it. I'm persuaded that every single class here has significant truths, themes, and materials that you need. And so don't allow yourself to bonk out. If you do, it's a bad attitude on your part. And I rebuke you for that. Rebuke yourself for that. You don't have that option. By the way, when you're preaching in a congregation somewhere, you may have people that don't like your style. And do you want them to bonk out on you? Do you want them not to stay with you because they don't like your style? You would say to them, hey, this is Bible. You've got to pay attention. Well, you have even more responsibility in Sunset. You've come to train. You're the cream of the crop. You are Christians that are serious about the Word. So don't allow bad attitudes to cause you to judge certain teaching styles as that which you don't like, and therefore you're not responsible for taking good notes. Number 10, participate in class activities. And I would say a couple of things here. Number 1, if you are a particularly quiet or reserved person, I was when I was here, and I didn't find myself asking a lot of questions. Actually, I let most everybody else ask questions. We had 60 in our class, and I thought, well, they probably need to ask questions more than I do. But if you're particularly quiet, you may need to ask an occasional question. And, of course, secondly, that needs to be done when it's allowed. You know, a teacher may talk for a while and then give opportunity for questions. Try to save those questions for that time. But if they don't, respectfully raise your hand, and if the teacher is going to allow that question, he'll call on you. If he doesn't call on you, put your hand down, write the question down, and maybe you'll have an opportunity later to ask him about that. Participate in class activities to the extent that the teacher will allow it, and that which is respectful. We have sort of a joke around here. I have some names on my notes here of past students. And those names are connected with students that always had their hands up, always had their hands up. I don't know how they wrote any notes. They always had their hands up. I won't mention any names, but they know who they are out there. And we kind of laugh about that, but at the same time, they were always wanting to ask questions, and they didn't take good notes. And so make sure you're respectful of your classmates about the questions you ask, about the comments you make. Make sure that the teacher is the teacher, that you don't put yourself in the role of instructing this class from all of your experience and your past background. Participate in class activities to the extent that is respectful, to the extent that is allowed, and to the extent that it will help you. Remember, you've come to learn, not to teach or to show off what you know. Number 11, think critically about what you're hearing. Think critically about what you're hearing. Now, when you heard that word critically, you may have thought of critical. That's not exactly the same thing, because critical means I have a right to tear down, I have a right to demean this. That's not what critical thinking is. Critical thinking is hearing and asking questions about what this means, knowing the questions that should be asked about what this means, what this implies, how does this apply, how does that connect with this passage, how does that harmonize with this message from the text. That's what critical thinking is. We're not talking about arguing. We're not talking about demeaning. We're not talking about putting down. We're not talking about debating. We're talking about questioning and thinking and how that relates to the whole picture of what God's trying to tell us. Now, while you're taking notes and while you're listening to what an instructor says, it may be difficult for you to think critically. If you can't do three things at once, then just listen to the instructor and take notes. At the same time, you may have to go back over these notes in the night after you've taken those notes. Maybe that's the time at which you think critically. Give yourself a little time to meditate, as David would say in the Psalms. Meditate on God's laws. Meditate on these things. And that way, you'll think critically. You may have to do that after you get out of here. Many things you'll have to restudy, and hopefully you will, after you get out of here, and restudy and think critically about these things. Number 12, be alert to repetition. If a teacher says something more than one time, he may be telling you that's important. He also may be trying to repeat it in different words or different ways or with illustrations to try to get that point across. If I say something one way and then I say it another way and another way, that gives the student time to assimilate that thought. Now, if you hear the teacher telling you over and over the same thing, maybe he's repeating the same concept, then write that concept down. Now, if he wants you to say it in certain words, then you've got to get those words down. But if he's just sort of repeating the same concept, then write that concept down the first time he says it. You don't have to repeat it time and time again in your notes. That gives you time to think critically. That gives you time to assimilate it. That gives you time to go back and fill in anything else in the notes that you missed or that you're thinking about while he's presenting repetitive material. So if something's repeated, it's repeated because it's essential, and you need to make sure that you understand that. That may appear on a test somewhere, and it's important to life. But also, that may give you time to catch up on your notes and think critically about something he's already said. Number 13, listen for introductory, concluding, and transition words and phrases. Phrases like, the following factors are, he's about to give you a list, isn't he? And those are important. And that makes it easy, of course, to write those notes down. The most important consideration is, or the bottom line, boy, that's where he's been going. He may have said all this, but then he says, now the most important thing, or the bottom line is. Make sure you get that material. Make sure you're tuned into that. He may say, in addition to. He may say, on the other hand. He may say, in conclusion. He may list 1, 2, 3, 4. He may list Roman numeral 1, A, and B. He may tell you the exact outline that he's following. And so certainly those are things that you need to get down. So listen for main points. Listen for transition words. Listen for introductory and concluding things. Number 14. Look at the board, the blackboard, or look at the screen that the transparency is on. Our brother Ed Wharton, beloved teacher, uses the blackboard quite extensively. Other teachers like Richard Rogers, and Doyle Gillum, and Gerald Payton use a lot of transparencies. Ted Stewart does too. that's helpful to you. Make sure you get that material down. But let me warn you that when a teacher puts the outline on a transparency or the blackboard, that is not all that you should write down. Many students think, well, if I just get down what he writes on the transparency, then that's all that's necessary. Normally, that's a skeletal type outline. You need to write in between. So when you're caught up with him on the outline that he's giving you, that's not an excuse to stop writing notes. Keep writing notes. Keep filling in the material so that you'll have exactly what he's talking about there. So don't allow yourself to stop with just the skeletal outline that the person is putting on the board. Number 15, watch the instructor's eyes. These men are not just spitting out information. They're teaching with passion. They're teaching the book that they love. They're teaching their Lord Jesus. They're teaching the plan of God from eternity to eternity. And so if a teacher looks down at his notes and makes some major point, that's probably noteworthy. If you can tell that he's ad-libbing a little bit or adding an illustration, then that's illustrative of a main point. Now, if you don't get the illustration, make sure you get the main point. But if he is, you can tell his passion in his eyes and his voice and his face, then make sure you get that down. Note that that's of significance to him and probably to the course. Know the difference between exposition and essence of a point. That's what I was saying. An illustration is not all of the significance of the point. It's an illustrative point. But you make sure you get the main points, first of all. Number 16, highlight the obvious clues. I would have not only pens, but I would have highlighters. And so if he says something important, he really hits this home, or she hits this home, as Miss Terry teaches the women, and you can tell, boy, that's really important. Might be a good idea to put some kind of clue there. Take you a highlighter and highlight that, or put a little mark in the margin so that you know, boy, that was really important. You may not remember that night. That may look like everything else on your notes, but it wasn't in the classroom. Make sure that you highlight those obvious clues of what's important to the course and what's important to the test. Number 17, under observing. Notice the instructor's interest level. If he's interested in it, it may be a test question. If he's interested in it, if he's really passionate about it, as I said, you can tell that in his face and his voice and his eyes, then that's really significant. And make sure you capture not only the material, but also the spirit with which he's presenting that. We're talking about three things in note-taking. The first was observing, and that's those 17 things that are under that. Number 2, let's talk about recording. Notice that under observing, some of those things are done before the class time and during the class time, maybe even after the class time. So observing is a rather comprehensive part of good note-taking. Secondly, we want to talk about recording. I'm persuaded that it's not just how fast you write, it is certainly not how pretty you write. Let me say something about that. I taught in New Zealand for 4 years. And the New Zealand mentality is very much to be neat. Well, and they often print everything they do, don't always write it. I found that in their attempt to be neat, they lost some material because they were having to write too slowly. Don't write too slowly. Notes are for you. Notes are for fullness. And neatness doesn't mean a great deal here. Now, you may have to retype your notes so that you can read them and the instructor can read them, but you need to be writing like crazy. And so write fast and write comprehensively. Let me make some suggestions about recording. I want to emphasize that there are several ways to take notes. And as I was looking on the web a few weeks ago, most of the universities give the same kind of approaches to note-taking. And I want to share some of those with you. And I want you to try different ones to see what works best for you. The first one is called the Cornell format of note-taking. Once again, we'll put something in the notebook to kind of show you how to do that. But this is a good way to take notes. I wish I'd known about it. I would have taken notes differently when I went through. Called the Cornell, or sometimes it's called the I-note fashion. Now here's what you do. Each page, and by the way, I want you to know that the instructors are going to be told that this year we're going to put a great deal of emphasis on note-taking. So what I'm telling you is important to your grade. So you need to take good notes for a good grade, but you also need to take good notes for the future. The Cornell method. It takes a piece of paper and it divides it off into certain sections. Now let me tell you that, first of all, for every class period, for every piece of paper you take notes on, you should have at the top of the page the following things. You should have the course name. You should have the date. You should have your name, and you should have a page number. You can put on the upper left-hand corner the course, the date, and your name. Then on the right-hand side, or maybe at the bottom, you can put the page number. Now, with that header in place, divide up your piece of paper into 3 parts. You're going to have about a 2-inch margin on the left. And so if this is a piece of note paper, you're going to draw a line about 2 inches from the left margin. Okay? And then you're going to draw that line across the top that separates the header from the other 3 parts. They're going to have a left side here, you're going to have a right side, and then you're going to have a bottom line all the way across that's about 1 inch from the bottom. So you've got 3 parts here. The main part for you in class is that right side of the piece of paper, about 2/3 of the piece of paper. You're going to take notes there. You're going to take notes not necessarily in outline form. You're going to take notes not necessarily in complete sentences form, because sometimes that takes too long. You're going to write thoughts. You're going to write in paragraph form. He's talking along or she's talking along and you're taking notes. And then she shifts subject or he shifts subject. Start a new paragraph. Start a new paragraph. You're writing thoughts. Okay? Make sense? On the left hand, in that 2-inch margin on the left-hand side, that's what's called your keywords or your clues section. Maybe if there's a little bit of a lull in the note-taking because they're talking about some illustrations or so forth, maybe you have time to glance back at the notes and say, hey, the key word there is justification. Put that in that left side. Maybe the key word here is love. Put that in the left side. Maybe the key word in this little paragraph down here is Christian joy. So that is in the left margin. You see, when you're looking back over those notes, you don't have to read the whole set of notes to know what that page is about. It's about justification, it's about love, it's about Christian joy. And that helps you at a quick glance know what those notes are about and how the development of those notes was taking place. So, you're taking major notes in the right half, you're taking little notes in the left half, keywords. Now down at the bottom, that little inch at the bottom, that's for putting your questions down. That's for putting things that you want to think about. Whoa, what does this imply about such and such? My wife's had cancer. How does this apply to that situation? Or later I'd like to ask him about this if I get the chance. So that's kind of your personal section to write down notes and questions for later. That's the Cornell format of note-taking. I think it's a very good method. Let me encourage you to start with that method. The teacher may give you an outline format. If he does, great. You can put an outline format in that right side where the notes are to be taken. So that's the Cornell method. A second method is called mind maps. Now I don't think like this, okay? This is not a method that I use. But depending on what side of the brain is sort of the dominant one for you, this may be very helpful to you. Mind maps. It can be used in conjunction with the Cornell method. It's something that may be used in class, but probably is going to be used at home after you go home at night and look at your notes. The mind map. The mind map tries to take the material that the teacher has given you and put it in some kind of format that shows you the relationship between different parts. For instance, suppose you change the format of your page for a minute. Suppose you have a top half and a bottom half. On the top half, you take notes in class. You leave the bottom half empty. And then at night, you come back and you're going to draw a circle in the middle. This is the mind map. You're going to draw a circle in the middle at the bottom half of that page. And in that circle, you're going to write the main thought of that whole paragraph or that whole 3 or 4 paragraphs above. And then you're going to draw spokes, like from a wheel or some other design that you would like to use. Think of, be creative. You come up with some method. Maybe he's talking about several different parts or points that are related to that main thought. And so, as you review this material later, you see the notes at the top, But then at a glance, you see this mind map, which has that central thought in the middle, and then it has spokes going out, or lines drawing to little circles or little squares of submaterial, of supportive material, or of illustrative material. And so at a glance, you kind of get the big picture of what this page is about. And so it's not just words on a page. Well, you think of a way to combine the Cornell method and the mind map method if that will help you in studying for your tests and so forth. A third method is just the outline method. And I suppose that's the one that's been used most here at Sunset through the years. Certainly the one I use. It's probably that which most of teachers use because we often preach and teach from outlines. That's the way we've been taught. That's also the way you'll be taught to preach when you take homiletics course or the preaching course with Ron Bontrager. But taking notes in outline form is a good way to take it. Sometimes, however, the teacher doesn't give you the outline. And so you're writing Roman numeral 1, and you're writing an A and a B and a C and 1, 2, 3 under C. And you're trying to figure out where the material goes as he talks. Well, sometimes you can let your desire to be so perfect in the outline cause you to lose the thought of what this teacher's talking about. And you don't want the outline to outweigh the importance of the material being presented, do you? You want the material in whatever format it's in. So you may have to just take notes in paragraph form, and then you may have to go home and, if you want it in outline form, try to figure out how the outline goes on that material. Of course, if a teacher puts it on a transparency and it's in outline format, boy, they've really helped you there. But they may not. They may not use transparencies. They're not obligated to use transparencies. A teacher is not obligated to tell you what the outline format is. Now, there may not be an outline format. Let me tell you something that students have done that's not a good idea, and hopefully you'll avoid it. Trying to take notes in outline format, they get lost, and they think, where's the teacher in the outline here? I don't know. And they try to figure it out, and 2 or 3 minutes later, because they've lost 2 or 3 minutes material, they hold up their hand and they say, sir, where are you in the outline? And that irritates a teacher, let me tell you, because the thought has been lost, and they know that you've not been with them for some time. So don't let making the perfect outline in your notes take precedence over you learning what the teacher is actually saying. His material is more important than you getting into some kind of perfect outline format. But if the instructor gives it to you in outline format, wonderful. In my courses, sometimes I give a skeletal outline. You can get it in the library, and you can take notes in the skeletal outline. The reason I did that is because sometimes students were stopping me and saying, where are you in the outline? And I decided, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'll give them the outline, and they can fill in the notes. Not every teacher does that. There are different ways of doing it. Number 4 under this, we've talked about Cornell format, we've talked about mind maps, we've talked about the outline form. Let me just say that if none of these work for you, you write in paragraph form. And I've already mentioned paragraph form, but let me say in regard to that, don't necessarily think that you have to have complete sentences in your outline, in your note-taking. Write phrases. Phrases can communicate as well as a complete sentence. If you're trying to complete the sentence, the teacher is probably 2 or 3 sentences ahead of you. So to get his sentences, you're going to have to work in phrases. So if you can have phrases that make up a paragraph, and then when your mind says, hey, he's kind of switched gears here, start a new paragraph. Start a new paragraph. And that separates thoughts. And that will help you get the material. If it's not an outline format, hey, what does it matter if you got the material? That's what's most important. So write in paragraph form and don't necessarily use full sentences. Number 5, use keywords. Keywords. If you find yourself taking down a lot of material, and when you get home you think, I don't know what this was about, you may need to train yourself to be thinking of, okay, he's talking in 1 or 2 paragraphs here, what's the key word? You remember on that Cornell format we had that left side that was for key words. Well, even if you don't use the Cornell format, you can still use key words. What's he talking about here? What is the key word? Maybe you want to highlight that key word in your paragraph or in the outline. Maybe you want to underline it or circle it. Some method of saying, you know, this paragraph is about adultery, or this paragraph is about marital sanctity, or whatever it's about. So that will help you know where he's going, what he's about. Use keywords. And then, maybe when you get home, writing down keywords will help you fill in other material that you think of, or that you remember that the teacher said, or that you've gained from talking with another student about that material. Use keywords. Number 6, use pictures and diagrams. One of the funniest things that has happened to me here at Sunset is teaching the Amers. This happened about 10 or 11 years ago. I was teaching the Amers, and the first time I taught them, and I got their notebooks in. I was teaching them Romans. I got their notebooks in, and I noticed quite a few of the students had drawn pictures in the margins. Now, they were probably drawing pictures because they were bored. Well, they were bored of my teaching, but I was sort of taken with that, because sometimes they would draw pictures to help them associate what I was saying with some kind of visual image. Now, we've talked about mind maps before, but maybe there's some other ways in which you can cause yourself to catch on to the material. Is there some kind of visual image? Is there some kind of person or some kind of diagram that you can draw quickly to say, you know, this goes with this material, and that's going to help you remember it. I know a lot of the memory techniques that people try to teach. You memorize text by remembering pictures, and so you may want to use pictures or diagrams to help you remember the material. Number 7, use only one side of your paper. Paper is cheap, and turning over on the back side and writing and cramming it up together is not good for your eyes. It's not good for your study purposes. Use only one side of your paper, and make sure that you spread that material out. A little bit later here I'm going to talk a little bit more of that, but use only one side of your paper. Don't skimp on paper, and it's easier for you to review. You won't accidentally forget something that way by not turning over on the back. I remember studying for tests in college, and I can remember, why didn't I study? Why didn't I cover that material in the review? And I got home after the test and realized, hey, that was on the back side of the paper, and I forgot those 2 or 3 pages where that was on the back side. If you need a little bit more support, we'll write your supporters so that you can have enough paper to write on one side of the paper. Number 8, excuse me, keep your own thoughts separate from what you gain from the instructor. Make sure that when you look at your notes, you have not put together yours and theirs so that it looks like all of what the instructor said. Now, it's all right for you to have your own thoughts. It's all right for you to be thinking. We want you to think critically. We want you to write down what thoughts you have. But make sure that you understand that you're going to be tested and expected to know what that instructor gave you. And so, if you're taking notes and all of a sudden you write in something that you're thinking right in there next to what he's been saying, and you don't separate that, you don't use a different color, or you don't highlight that to show that, or don't have some symbol, you may think next week when you review that material that that's the point the teacher made, and it may be your thought. So keep your thoughts separate. You may have a special symbol for that. You may have a special designation for that. Some way for you to know that that's not what the instructor had to say specifically. It may be right, it may be good, but it's not what he said. Number 9, have a lost symbol. Have a lost symbol. We all get lost at times. The instructor's talking along, and I get lost. I don't know where he is. I don't know, I can't connect it with what I just wrote down, and I just don't know where he is. It's time to write down a lost symbol. Maybe that's an L in the left margin. Maybe on your Cornell format, that's in that left side, and put an L. So put an L there, skip some space, and continue to take notes. Don't stop until you know where he is. Start taking notes again, but leave some space in there so that you can fill that in later. Start taking notes again, and then I suspect at some point in time, or when he pauses, or he says something that really registers, oh, that's what he's talking about. I know the connection now. Then you can refill in that material that you missed the first time. But don't sit there saying, I'm lost, I'm just going to wait for him to come back to me. You may lose 5 minutes of material. You don't want to do that. Keep your nose to the grindstone and keep taking those notes. By the way, don't demand that he stop and explain to you where he is. Maybe nobody else is lost in the classroom. Respect their time. Respect their need to go on with the material. And so if you're lost, put an L there and go on. By the way, don't turn to another person, because you may distract them and cause them to be lost as well. Maybe at break, maybe after class, you can fill in that material at a later time by talking to somebody else. Number 10, I've already mentioned this, I want to mention it again. Label, number, and date all notes. You should have the class, perhaps the instructor's name, you should have the date, and you should have your name there, and then the page number as well. Now let me say this, that as far as I know, every instructor is going to demand good notes. If you happen to be absent, if you're sick for some reason, you are responsible for getting notes from someone else to fill in that gap. Now those notes are not yours, and so those notes, when they are copied and put in your notebook, and they should be, you don't want to miss that day's material. That's 2.5 hours worth of material. You need those notes. So you are responsible for getting a copy of those notes from somebody in the class who's willing to give their notes to you. They should be labeled as their notes and should be put in there, not represented as your own. If you want notes beyond what you get, in other words, you're learning to take good notes, but you're not very good at it yet. Maybe you take notes and you think, you know, so-and-so takes better notes than I do. If that person is willing to allow you to see their notes or to allow you to have their notes, that's fine. But what you are not to represent as your notes is their notes. Their notes are their notes, your notes are your notes. So if you want their notes as an extra guide to you for future reference, then you copy their notes and put them behind your notes. Please do not represent them as your notes, as that is plagiarism and an unacceptable deceit. They may be helpful to you in the future, but don't represent them as yours. Number 11, use standard abbreviations. When you're taking notes, don't write full words. Use abbreviations. Abbreviations that you understand, abbreviations that you're going to understand in weeks and months and maybe years to come if you don't retype your notes. They shorten the process. They allow you to take quicker notes. So think of ways in which you can use abbreviations. Maybe capital J is Jesus the whole time you're here. Maybe capital C is Christ the whole time you're here. You can shorten those words. Maybe justification is J-U-S-T, period. There are a lot more letters to write, but you can shorten that. Learn to do that. It will facilitate the process. If you will use abbreviations, if you will use phrases instead of complete sentences, you will find you'll get a lot more material on the page. Number 12, use blank and white space. Now this is kind of back to using one side of the paper, but even on one side of the paper, sometimes I pick up people's notes and they're so crammed together that the eyes don't see what's on the page. I don't think I'm alone in that. I think you need white space between designations on an outline or between paragraphs. Don't cram paragraphs together. Don't use too small a font. Use a large font. Give the eyes, and your eyes are going to be on the page a lot, aren't they, while you're here? Reading textbooks and reading notes. Your eyes are going to get tired, and tired eyes do not like things crammed together. So spread things out. Use white space. Use a big enough font. Use a big enough writing so that your eyes can take it in when you're studying and it'll make sense to them. Don't be stingy on paper or space. Use good pens to be clear and dark. By the way, a lot of eyes don't like red ink either. They don't like orange ink. They don't like green ink. You find out what your eyes can handle. If it's midnight and you're studying for a test and you're looking at red ink, you may have a hard time studying for that. So think about some of these things that are going to be important to you in the long run. Number 13, use tape recorders effectively. Some people do tape the classes and some don't. For most students, now some might have the time to do this, but for most students, you don't have time to go home and re-listen to the tape and still get all of your assignments done. But if you've got a lost symbol there, or if you've got a segment of the lecture that you didn't get, boy, a recorder can be so valuable to turn to that section and re-listen to 15, 20 minutes maybe. Oh, that's what he was talking about, and fill in your notes. So use it effectively. It may be something that you don't listen to while you're here, but you have a record of it for future reference. You may want to do that. But use them effectively. They can be good tools, but they can also be a little bit too consuming if you're planning on going home and listening to 5 hours worth of lecture. and then try to get several hours worth of assignments done as well. Number 14, take notes in different colors. Take notes in different colors. Maybe there is a point at which you want to write something in red that's short. Well, your eyes are going to see that in connection to the black. Maybe you want to use highlighters. Maybe you want to use different colors for lecture notes and another color for notes taken on reading and another color for your comments. However you do that, you may want to use that wisely. Now, if you're always switching pens in class, you may lose something. So be aware that you can lose some time in switching colors of pens. We've talked about observing. We've talked about recording. Now let's talk about the review process. Remember, we've said note-taking is a comprehensive thing. We've done our homework beforehand. That creates the questions that we come to class with. So when I sit down in class with my pen ready to go, I'm ready. I'm anxious to hear. I know where we are and I know what he's trying to say, but I've got some questions, so feed me, teacher. And that'll prevent me from wanting to be entertained or sort of, you know, I'm just plopped down on the pew and you got to hit me, teacher. That'll prevent that kind of attitude. And now in class I've taken good notes. I've used the Cornell method. I may have used the mind map method. I may have used paragraph form or whatever. But now it's time to go home. What do I do before I come back to that class? Do I leave those notes alone? If you have a Tuesday-Thursday class, suppose you take notes on Thursday. When do you meet that class again? You don't meet that class till next Tuesday. That's 5 days. A lot of things happen at Sunset in 5 days. And you're going to forget that material. It's not going to be fresh unless you do some reviewing and looking over those notes, maybe more than once. Actually, when you get notes in place, to review notes doesn't take very long. In fact, you can flip through those notes fairly quickly. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes review would be very helpful several times between Thursday and Tuesday if those are your class period times. Let me make these suggestions in regard to reviewing. And this is one of the most neglected areas by a lot of our students. But it can really facilitate good test taking if you will over and over look through your notes. Number 1, review your notes within 24 hours. Of course, if you're rewriting them or you're typing them at home, that is an excellent technique. Now, in my day, in 1970, we didn't have computers. So we didn't have people taking notes in class. So I wrote notes. Now, I took notes very, very quickly, and I knew that if I didn't type those notes that night, I probably couldn't read them the next day. So I went home, and I spent the first 2 hours typing notes on an electric typewriter. But those notes were very important to me because, you see, the same day I took the notes, I was going over those notes as I was typing them in. I was reviewing those notes very, very quickly. You need to do that. We're told that you forget up to 80% of what you hear or even what you write down within 24 hours. Well, that's a lot. And we don't want to lose that much if at all possible. And if you will review your notes within the first 24 hours, there won't be quite as much cramming the night before an exam. So make sure you go home and review those notes and maybe type them if that's an opportunity that you have to do. You may not be a good enough typist to do that. Sometimes wives or mates type the notes. That's probably a pretty good thing for them, but it doesn't allow you to review your notes. Secondly, edit your notes. You know, we talked about that Cornell method. When you go home and you look at the right side of those notes, that's the time to edit. That's the time to add in. That's the time that if you read something out of the text or something out of a textbook that goes in there, add that. Remember, those are your notes. Those aren't the teacher's notes. You may want to add that in the left column where you've got your clues and keywords. You may want to put that down at the bottom. Okay? So this is a time for editing your notes. You may need to expand abbreviations. You may need to rewrite illegible notes. You may need to label any pages that you've not labeled. Make sure that all that's done. Give yourself time, maybe even to put the outline. You wrote paragraphs. You know this is an outline, and maybe you can now see the outline as you look back over your notes. So edit your notes within that 24-hour period of time. Number 3, daily reviews. You say, daily? I'm not going to have that class for 5 days. I would suggest strongly to you that if after you've edited and reviewed those notes in the first 24 hours, suppose you have that class on Thursday. You edit those notes that night on Thursday night. sometime on Friday or Saturday. Pull those notes out. If you took 10 pages of notes, it won't take you long to look back over those notes. If you just kind of look through those notes, flipping the pages, looking on the left side to see what the key words are, just reading the notes, you can do that in 10 minutes. And that material will begin to stick. If you do that on Sunday and do that on Monday, and then as you come into class, as we talked about in the observing section, you quickly look over those notes. Man, you've been thinking about that material for 5 days, and you're ready for that teacher to come back in and take you to the next level of the material that he's talking about. Daily reviews. Number 4, mind maps. And I mentioned this under the note-taking process. After you get home, that's probably the time to do mind maps. And again, I don't have a lot of material on mind maps, but there is something in the notebook that I mentioned that's in the library, some good material on mind mapping. Again, that can be a very significant and helpful technique for you to put the material in perspective, to know how one part relates to the other. Very helpful. Do that at home. That's the reviewing process. Number 5, we mentioned this also under observation, the pre-class reviews. I used to get up early in the morning before I'd go to a class, and part of the thing that I did while I was eating breakfast was to look over the notes for the morning class. Well, again, that sets me thinking, well, what's it going to be like today? What did we talk about last time? Where's he going to take us? How far are we going to get? Oh, there's that verse coming up. I want to know what that has to say. What's he going to say about it? Pre-class reviews. In the morning before you go to class, and then just a couple of minutes before class actually starts. Get yourself in gear. Folks, I'm telling you that not many students do this. And we can really be helped if we will do these things. Number 6, locate any related material that you can that's related to the material that you've been studying. We have an excellent library. Bobby Payton and her helpers are very, very helpful in putting together a library that's useful to you. We have things on computer. We have people in there to help you. And so what material we have, we'd be glad to share with you. We have a couple of different libraries in town here that can be very helpful. You can go to the LCU library, though we're not allowed to check books out of their library because those books are for their students. Certainly that material and those resources are available to you. Lots of periodicals, lots of books. Get acquainted with the LCU library. There may be materials that you can add to your notes that are going to be helpful to you. When you're preaching out in the boondocks somewhere, you may not have access to religious libraries. Your own library may not be big enough to give you the resources that you really want. So what are you going to do? Well, while you're here, you may want to become familiar with what LCU has to offer or what the Texas Tech Library has to offer. Of course, the Internet has opened up so many things to us, and probably younger students are a lot more aware of what's on the Internet and what the facilities there are beyond what I would. Take advantage of these things. Learn what's out there. And copy material and put it in your notebooks to add to the notes that you have taken in class. Certainly, for instance, my class in Romans. I can't cover the book of Romans significantly in the short period of time we have here. And that's only to set, our study is only to set the stage for your future study in years to come. What are the materials you're going to use to help you in your study in years to come? Note-taking. Very, very important. Observing, recording, and reviewing. Folks, note-taking is hard work. It's not something that the teacher is responsible for. It's what you're responsible for. And I'm persuaded that if you will put into effect these techniques, it may take some time for them to become habit. It may take some time for them to become efficiently done. But stay the course. They will pay dividends in the long run. And when you finish a course and you look back at your notes and you say, boy, I got a lot of good stuff out of that course. I think I got what that teacher was talking about. I think I have enough to use this in years to come. But if in years to come you pull that notebook off your shelf because you're going to teach Ed's Galatians again and you don't have any notes in there to speak of, you really lost just about everything except what you might remember from that class, which is not going to be much because you will have lost 80 or 90%. Don't miss the opportunity to take good notes. Only comes around once. That class is only going to be taken once if you pass it. And if you do, you want a complete notebook. I'm encouraging the teachers this year to spend a little bit more time in making sure that that their students take good notes. They're going to grade you rather significantly on that. So don't cheat yourself in that area, and hopefully we can help you do that. If you have trouble with an individual teacher in note-taking, talk to another student that's taking good notes. Find out what they're doing. See how they're getting the notes down. And if you're still having trouble, talk to the teacher and ask him, are there certain clues, are there certain things I need to listen to? I want to take notes better, and I'm sure that they'll be willing to help you. Well, God bless you in recording the good things that are coming your way while you're here at Sunset, and good note-taking. Hello, I'm Charles Spear, the Dean of Residential